In Delaware, member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Democratic Senator Chris Coons. Senator Coons has a new op-ed calling on America to pay up in the fight against ISIS.
No. No! What the fucking fuck? Are you serious? You motherfuckers want us to pay for another war, and this time you're practically demanding it.
You write in Sunday's Philadelphia Inquirer, if we must fight, we must pay. Tell us about the piece. The senator writes, sorry, there's little...
What the fuck was that? This is why a lot of people don't watch mainstream media anymore. Because you guys practically script every single thing. Even the other people have fucking scripts.
Precedent in pre-9/11 American history for charging into war without finding a way to pay for it. From the War of 1812, for which Congress approved new taxes in 3 consecutive years, to the Gulf War, Congress took steps to pay for every major conflict. Yet Congress has failed to offset the cost of the post-9/11 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. As of November 30th, the United States had already spent nearly $5.4 billion since U.S. airstrikes against ISIS began in August 2014. It's $11 million every day.
Yeah, and what do we have to show for it? Absolutely nothing. While the Russians, they go in, what, not even a full week? 3 or 4 days? And they've blown up more targets than we have since we've been in there.
We pay for our wars with a credit card, and when the pain of war is felt only by our troops and their families,
the pain not only felt by the troops and their families, I mean it's a lot worse, but taxpayers also have to deal with all that. You know, you guys freaking increase taxes, and it makes the people's paycheck a lot worse. So there's economic backlash from it.
It's far too easy for our nation's leaders to send soldiers into harm's way without a national conversation about the merits of our involvement, and far too easy for those conflicts to drag on. I think the most compelling thing you write about is how the burden is unfairly shouldered by the military and their families. Tell us about that piece of this, which I think everybody can appreciate.
Well, that's right. As we look back at the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, the United States had charged into war in Afghanistan against the Taliban and al-Qaeda that had attacked the United States in 2001, and in Iraq against Saddam Hussein, with no conversation, no serious thought given to how we would pay for those wars, both the very long-term human costs of caring for and supporting our veterans who personally bear the scars and the sacrifices of battle, and with no real thought to putting the costs of those 2 wars on America's credit card and thus burdening our children and grandchildren with those costs.
Fucking hell, $6 trillion just to care for veterans and military replenishment? Fucking hell. Where do they get this fucking money?
As a member of the Foreign Relations Committee and the Appropriations Committee,
$1.64 trillion for Iraq and $715 billion for Afghanistan. That's about what, 2.35 trillion added to the fucking debt? So good job. $8 trillion you wasted.
I'm trying to raise my hand and say we're not doing our job in Congress.
You know, Coons, you've been in office since 2010. So don't you think it's a little late for you to just slightly raise your hand? You're not going to raise it all the way up. You're just going to, kind of so no one really notices, huh?
President Obama sent us an AUMF, that's Washington speak for a request for a declaration of war against ISIS.
Hey, what? Obama, the dictator-in-chief, actually sent your declaration of war instead of saying fucking just going for it? Well, I didn't see that one coming.
All the way back in February, and we have not taken it up, debated it, and passed it. And
at least you're bringing up debate, but you're bringing up the wrong topics. Instead of having debates on the right policies to go into war, we should be debating on whether to go to war or not.
We owe that to our veterans and to those serving in the conflict against ISIS.
You know how you would show that you really owe it to the American soldiers fighting in wars? By sending them home.
But we also need to stand up and say, how are we going to pay for it?
Why do we have to pay at all? Why can't we just, not go to war for once?
All the previous wars, as you referenced, before Iraq and Afghanistan, had a dedicated war surtax. And I think that's one way we could fairly pay for it, with a small surtax that exempted active duty military.
And there we go, everybody. Another tax. But don't worry, it's going to be small, right?
military families and veterans, but there's other ways we could pay for it. We just can't keep going without even discussing it.
Senator, yeah, the surtax idea makes sense logically, but then you run into a small, and this is just to play devil's advocate, a small problem, which is it's really, really difficult to actually budget for wars. For instance,
it's not that you fucks can't budget a war, it's just that you guys keep putting more and more into it instead of just saying we should take a break or just stop completely once we run out of money.
The initial projections for the cost of the Iraq War, I believe, were $50 to $60 billion, ended up being well over $1 trillion. So what happens when that surtax isn't enough? What happens when you have to go back to the well?
Let me guess, Coons, after you set the tax at a certain rate, you guys are just going to increase it when you need more money to fight these stupid fucking wars, right?
Well, you literally can adjust the amount of the surtax annually in order to meet the needs of that specific conflict.
Right on the fucking money.
It frankly will make members of Congress hesitate. There's a whole lot of outrageous statements being made, very aggressive, very bellicose statements being made by Republican presidential candidates and by others of my colleagues in the Senate about how much they would do, how aggressive they would be. I think if they also had to vote to fund the cost of the wars they are threatening to expand, it would create somewhat of a speed bump. It would
Bull fucking shit, Coons. All these people who want to go to war, they're getting paid for it by the military-industrial complex. So they don't even give a fuck.
Force us to debate not just the strategy of the war against ISIS, which we need to more seriously contemplate. It would also force us to look at the cost, short-term and long-term, of the conflict that we are already well into against ISIS.
You know, why don't you guys talk about Rand Paul's strategy? His strategy is to not go to war, which would solve the budget problem and would solve the outrageous claims by the Republican and Democratic people.
Our question from Gene Robinson.
Senator, why isn't Congress taking a vote? Why isn't Congress voting to support, to fund the wars? Is it pure politics? Is it disagreement with the policy? Why?
I would think it's because you guys don't want to send more men and women to die in these stupid-ass wars.
Well, we did take up and pass an AUMF, a declaration of war, through the Foreign Relations Committee late in the last Congress. It did not make it to the floor, and under this current Republican-controlled Congress, we have not taken it up and debated it. And, Gene, centrally it's because there's a disagreement. A group of us, Republicans and Democrats, on the Foreign Relations Committee have tried to cobble together a bipartisan coalition, but I think there is legitimate concern by our committee chairman and ranking member that we wouldn't be able to get a strong bipartisan vote, and they worry that that would undermine the war effort.
Isn't that some shit? They're more worried about the fucking war effort's image than actually not trying to send the fucking more men and women to die. What the fuck, man?
I respect that concern, but several members of the committee, excuse me, Senator Kaine of Virginia, principally myself and several others, Republicans and Democrats, think we owe it to the people to debate this issue and to take it up and vote on it.
Well, bruh fucking vote, Coons. You finally grew a backbone. I guess some other congressmen did too. It's too bad you guys didn't have that backbone earlier, especially when Obama used executive orders to go into Libya. And all you just sat on your asses and did nothing.
If we're going to have critics of President Obama's strategy in Syria and Iraq, then we ought to do our job and debate strategy and debate authorization and do the role that the founders imagined for Congress.
But realistically, Senator, what do you see the chances of that happening, especially as we go into this election year and everything becomes even more politically fraught than it is otherwise? And if...
Isn't that something? Wait until the next president gets into office so that they could blame them for any fuck-ups.
The AUMF can't even come up, then where do you go legislatively with this, with your arguments?
Well, I understand that with the Iowa caucuses and New Hampshire primary just a month or 6 weeks away, that the argument, oh, we can't do anything serious because we're in the middle of a presidential election.
Why do we have to do anything at all? Couldn't we just, like, you know, let a different country take care of it? I mean, Russia's doing pretty fine. Why don't we just let them do it for now?
Does begin to hold some sway. But we can't have a country where Congress fails to do its constitutional duty simply because we have an election. That runs against the founders' vision that we could both legislate and have campaigns at the same time in a vibrant democracy.
You know, I feel like the founding fathers didn't expect a lot of this to happen, especially the complacent American populace who just let you guys do all this shit. And I will admit, I was one of them. Not anymore. I'm tired of you fucks and fucking everything up.
I do think if we bring this up in committee, enough responsible senators will step up and make compromises that we will end up with a meaningful authorization. At the very least, I think we owe it to those who we've sent into harm's way, who are currently serving in Iraq and Syria, to know that we've got their back and the...
You're fucking funny. Freaking, you got their backs.
We authorize the actions that they're taking. I am concerned, given the trajectory of the presidential campaign, that we've got some candidates, Donald Trump in particular, but others, who are making statements that are just outrageous and that, frankly, are playing right into the frame that ISIS wants us to be saying about our conflict with terrorism in the Middle East.
It's an important piece. Senator Chris Coons, thank you for writing it. Thank you for being here.
Now, I'm going to show you some numbers because apparently people like me are in the minority. Look at this shit. Would you support or oppose the U.S. sending ground troops to fight ISIS in Iraq and Syria? 52% support it. And sure, 75% of them are Republicans, but 41% Democrats. 45% independent. For fuck's sake. And then 8% apparently don't know or don't, well, I guess they don't have to answer, but they don't know. Come on now. Then let's go down a bit. If you support it, do you think the U.S. should send a significant number of troops or a limited number of troops? 52% significant, 56 Republican, 42 Democrat, 54 independent. Fucking hell. And the reason why I don't say college degree is because I don't really have a college degree, and I don't think that we should send any troops in. I mean, war is war. You don't need a college degree to really, or I would think you wouldn't need one to understand that war is war. And then the last two polls. Do you think that combating ISIS with overwhelming military force will be more likely to help end the terrorist threat, or create additional terrorist threats? 52% say that'll end it. 52% says that'll end it. Help end terrorism. You know, that didn't fucking happen when we went into Iraq and Afghanistan, now did it? And the final one. Which of the following comes closer to your point of view? The U.S. should be leading the fight against ISIS, or a coalition? At least people don't want the U.S. to be the leader of it in this one. 66% say that they should be part of a coalition. Well, only 5% say that they shouldn't even fight. Come on, assholes. And this is what happens when you push terrorist fear-mongering bullshit. You fucking make it where people who don't want to go to war become the fucking minority.